Okay, section A, natural hazards, question 1. Okay, you've got a line graph here showing average annual maximum temperatures in London in these years. So we've got to say about the changes, are they true or false? Tick the correct boxes. Lowest temperatures in 1950, go up 1950, yes, that's the lowest. Temperatures have increased steadily, well, that would be a steady increase, so no, they haven't. The difference between the highest and the lowest is 2 degrees. Well, we know the lowest there. The highest is up here, and that is 16 degrees, I think, and this one is 12.6. So that's false. The highest temperatures are in the 1990s. Well, this is the 1990s here. So, yes, the highest temperatures were then, so true. Okay, so it's 4 marks there, 1 for each one. Okay, on to the next question. We've got a nice map here of the North Pole. Shows the extent, the area of sea ice in 2012. Got to finish this sentence. Sea ice has been lost from some areas in the Arctic, including the. So we've got to see which areas have lost. Well, it's this area here. That's where it was then, and the white is where it is now. So that's number 1, that's the Beaufort Sea. The Arctic sea ice along line AB was about 2,006 kilometres on average between these dates. But what was it in 2012? Well, you need to grab yourself a blank piece of paper, pop it on the AB line, mark on where the white is, go down to the scale, and I would say that's 1,500 kilometres. The mark scheme said you could have anything between 1,000 and 500 and 1,600. Okay, part B, suggest one reason for the changes in the extent of the Arctic sea ice shown on the map. So we've got to give one reason. We've got 2 marks, so we know that we will have to give a developed reason in which we link at least 2 ideas together. So for this one, we need to talk about fossil fuels being burnt, okay, and that releases CO2, which causes increased global temperatures, which you could call global warming, and that melts the sea ice. Okay, so idea number 1 and idea number 2. Okay, next question. Earthquakes occur at destructive plate margins. We've got our destructive subduction margin here. This is the most common one that you're asked about, so make sure you know it off by heart. This question is only about earthquakes. We have to explain why earthquakes occur at these margins. So they don't want to know about the fold mountains, they don't want to know about the ocean trench, and they don't want to know anything about volcanoes, just the earthquakes. So it's always the same, 4 steps in the right order. Okay, so for this one, step 1, we've got that the oceanic plate subducts under the continental plate, and you can say it's because it's more dense. Okay, number 2, we have got that the plates get stuck, or that they don't slide easily due to friction. They rub on each other and get stuck. Number 3, tension builds up between them. And then for number 4, that pressure is suddenly released. Okay, the plates slip. This is your key word. Without that word, you won't get that last mark. You can add in that the pressure being suddenly released fractures the rock, sends out shock waves that when they reach the surface make it vibrate. Okay, so that's your 4 marks, your 4 steps in the right order. Level 1, 1 to 2, level 2, 3 to 4. If you've got this one, you've missed out steps, or you've got the steps in the wrong order. Okay, next one. People continue to live in areas at risk from earthquakes. Why is this? Tick 2 boxes. Make sure you follow the instructions. People can't afford to move away. Yes. People have plenty of time to evacuate. No, because you don't get any warning of an earthquake, so you can't evacuate people. Many buildings are designed to absorb shockwaves. Yes, we know that. People believe that their lives are in danger. Well, it would be lives aren't in danger. Okay, so 2 marks there. Right, we've got our long question here, our 6 mark for this one. To what extent can the risk from the volcanic earthquake or volcanic eruption or earthquake be reduced? So as always, our CFCs, command word to what extent. That tells me it's evaluate question. Before I go any further, I know that my structure is on one hand and on the other hand. What's my focus? My focus is on the risk and reducing it. It's not about stopping the earthquake. It's not about monitoring the earthquake. It's about reducing the risk. So what content am I going to put in? Well, when we come to talking about reducing the risk, we want to talk about protection. We want to talk about planning. We want to talk about monitoring, and we want to talk about prediction. Now, for an earthquake, which is the one I'm going to do, these two don't reduce the risk, can't reduce the risk, but these two can. So I'm going to start on one hand, the risk can be reduced, okay, by protecting people from falling buildings. And how can we do this? We can do this by building earthquake-proof buildings, and I might give an example there of the Taipei 1 in Taiwan, and then I'm going to go on to my next point, my planning. Planning can also protect people because they don't panic. Okay, they have a plan. The emergency services have a plan and know exactly what to do because they've practiced it. My example for this would of course be Japan and their earthquake drill day, where all across the country they pretend there's an earthquake and the emergency services practice, the hospitals practice, the police practice, the phone service practices, and all the school kids practice by having a drill and putting on their heads their protective triangular hats and going outside and sitting in the open space. Right, so now I've got to go to my on the other hand. We can't reduce the risk. Okay, and monitoring, which is done by a seismometer, measures the intensity of the earthquake or the shaking of the ground, but it only happens at the time. It does not help us to forewarn, so we can't evacuate. And lastly, prediction. We can't forewarn. All we can do is to look at areas that are likely to be affected by earthquakes, and we can perhaps think about using zoning there so that we can put low value land uses like football pitches there, and not high value or ones with lots of people like businesses or homes. But this is really hard to do retrospectively. Now if I put a but in there, retrospectively means after people already live there, so after it's happened. So it's hard to do retrospectively. Now by putting a but in there, I've shown complexity, which is likely to take me up to the 6 out of 6 rather than just 5. So we've got level 1, level 2 and level 3. So this one's a level 3 at the moment. I've got a balanced argument, I've got named examples, but most importantly I have explained exactly about the risk. I have linked back to the risk. I should probably start with put a sentence in to summarise at the beginning. So the risk can be reduced to some extent, I'm going to say, or a little bit, and then I'm going to go into my answer. Okay, next one, study the figure below. In which two areas are tropical storms common? Well, the clues in the question: tropical storms happen in the tropics, so it can't be E and it can't be B. It can't be A either, because that's on land and tropical storms happen over the water. So we've got the two correct answers there. Okay, this one was a bit tricky. Study the satellite image below. It shows a tropical storm in the Bay of Bengal. We've got to mark with an arrow and label two features. So with this one, you've got the eye, which is there. So that sort of lighter bit in the middle. And then around the eye you've got the eye wall, and it was quite difficult to get that accurate, but it's just the line around the edge of the eye. Easier would be an anti-clockwise spiral of cloud. You might say that there's thick cloud in the middle and thin clouds to the edge. Remember, you can't write things that you can't see, so you can't write air rising, air being sucked up, water droplets, strong winds. You can't see any of those things, so you can't write them. Two features, 2 marks. Okay, last question on this one. Can I apologise here? This should have said 9 marks and 3 spag marks. Okay, so we've got assess the importance of the primary and secondary effects of tropical storms. Okay, so with our command word focus, content, structure, command word is assess. So that is another evaluate, say how, to what extent, how important these are. The focus is on the importance. Well, that's an interesting question. The importance for what? For who? Is it the economic importance? Is it the social? Is it the environmental? There's lots of things to think about there that you can bring in complexity into this answer, which is what you need for those top marks. Okay, so our content has to be about primary, secondary effects. So we must use those words in our answer, and I think I'm going to use them as part of my structure. It's a tropical storm. Now we're only going to reach the top marks if we have a named example, and our named example was Typhoon Haiyan in the Philippines. Okay, so how am I going to structure this? Well, I think I'm going to have 2 main sections, one about primary and one about secondary, and on each one I'm going to show how they're important, and I'm going to try to compare which ones I think are the most important. Okay. I'm just finding the mark scheme for this, excuse me. Okay, so on the mark scheme you can see all of the primary effects down here and all of the secondary effects down here. So what we've got to decide is which ones we want to use and which ones we think are more important. So I'm going to start with the primary effects. Okay, so I'm going to say on one hand, the primary effects are very important. Notice I'm using the question words there, even if I want to say they're serious, they're dramatic or whatever, I'm using the word important from the question. So I'm going to say people are killed, and I'm going to cite the evidence of 6,000 people by Typhoon Haiyan, and most of them were caused by the storm surge. Okay, now I need to then think about my secondary effects that I might compare with that. So I'm going to talk about displaced people in a minute. Other things that are really important with the primary effects is the physical destruction of a place, and I'm going to talk about Tacloban, the main settlement that was hit by Typhoon Haiyan, and that 90% of it was destroyed, including the airport. Okay, and that was important because of the rebuilding cost. Okay, and the airport because it meant that emergency supplies and rescue teams couldn't get there. Okay, so I'm going to say that's why that was important. Now I need to talk about my secondary effects there. Now, on the other hand, secondary effects are also important. Okay, and I'm going to talk again about about people and how they're affected, and I'm going to talk about the fact that there are 14 million people who were made homeless and 6 million who lost their livelihood, and most of those lost their fishing boats. Now I'm going to say that this is more important because it was more people. Okay, so I'm having to assess the importance here. So I'm saying more important. Why? Because it affected more people and lasted for longer. So these people are going to be affected by losing their livelihood for probably the rest of their lives, because they've got to rebuild it, they've got to start all over again, they've got to set up their businesses and so on, and they probably won't get any compensation for what they've lost. So I'm going to say that's more important. Okay, I now want to also think about this destruction. I want to carry that through to here. Okay, and I'm going to talk about the destruction of the hospitals and the schools. Now I'm going to say that the most important thing is the secondary effects of that, okay, are that children lose out on education probably for the next 5-10 years until they can afford to rebuild all the schools. And I'm going to say that life expectancy and health are seriously affected again into the future for many, many years. So I'm going to say again that the secondary effects of destruction are more important. Okay, so it's a little bit muddled there, but in this section I've explained why I think these are more important. So for my level 3, what have I done? I've got my named examples, I've got place-specific information, I have got a structure that assesses, I've used my assessing words, okay, I've shown a level of complexity where I'm thinking about more people, that they lasted for longer, and I've explained that. So I've done everything that I need there to get up into my level 3.